When the 20th century began, humanity felt unstoppable. Cities climbed higher into the sky. Electricity pushed back the night. Factories multiplied wealth. Engines crossed continents. Telegraph wires carried words faster than horses ever could. Every year seemed to prove the same idea. Tomorrow would be bigger, richer, safer than today. Progress had become a kind of religion. And then came Titanic. She was not introduced to the world as merely a ship. She was presented as proof. Proof that steel could master the ocean. Proof that engineering could defeat uncertainty. Proof that the modern age had outgrown the old fears of wind, wave, and distance. At nearly 900 feet long, Titanic was the largest moving object ever built by human hands. Her interiors rivaled the finest hotels in Europe. She carried electric lights, elevators, elegant dining halls, libraries, smoking rooms, Turkish baths, and suites reserved for the richest people alive. To many, she did not look like transportation. She looked like the future. In April 1912, thousands gathered in Southampton to watch her depart for New York on her maiden voyage. Some came to celebrate, some came to work, some came to say goodbye, and more than 2,000 people stepped aboard carrying different dreams. Millionaires boarded with trunks of tailored clothing and private plans. Immigrant families boarded with bread, blankets, and hope. Crew members boarded with duty. Musicians boarded with instruments, servants boarded with silence. From the dock, they all entered the same ship, but not the same world. First-class passengers walked through grand halls lined with polished wood and warm light. Crystal chandeliers glowed above carved staircases. Fine china waited on white tablecloths. Every detail whispered comfort, status, certainty. Far below them, in third class, families crowded into modest cabins, narrow corridors, shared rooms, hard bunks. Yet many of them were happier than anyone upstairs, because discomfort meant nothing compared to where they had come from. Ahead was America. Deeper still, beneath elegance and hope, another world burned.
In the boiler rooms, stokers fed coal into roaring furnaces hour after hour, faces blackened by soot, shirts soaked with sweat, arms aching. Titanic's luxury floated on the backs of men most passengers would never meet. That is often how progress works. Its shining surface is visible, its hidden cost is not. The first days at sea felt perfect. The Atlantic was calm, air was crisp. Children ran the decks, couples leaned against railings, wealthy passengers discussed markets and politics over long lunches. Third-class passengers sang, laughed, danced, and imagined new lives. Titanic became a miniature society moving west through open water, a floating portrait of the age itself. But the ocean had not agreed to admire it. As the voyage continued, wireless operators received messages from nearby ships. Ice reported ahead, large ice fields, dangerous waters. More warnings followed through the day. They were acknowledged, some were delivered, some were delayed, and Titanic continued at speed. For generations, people have argued about that decision. Was it arrogance, pressure to arrive quickly, confidence in the ship, a captain's routine judgment? Maybe it was something simpler. Human beings are skilled at recognizing danger in hindsight and dismissing it in the moment, especially when everything still looks fine. On the night of April 14th, the sea became strangely still. There was little wind, almost no swell. The surface looked dark and smooth beneath a sky crowded with stars. Passengers admired the beauty of the night, but calm water creates its own trap. When waves strike ice, they often leave white foam visible in darkness. That night, there were no waves, only black sea and black sky.
Near midnight, 2 lookouts stood high above the deck in the crow's nest. No binoculars, only eyesight, concentration, and cold air cutting through layers of clothing. Then they saw it. A shape, a shadow, something larger than darkness itself. "Iceberg, right ahead!" The warning raced to the bridge. Orders were shouted. The wheel was turned hard to port. Engines reversed. But giant objects carried giant momentum. Titanic responded, too slowly. At 11:40 p.m., the starboard side scraped along the iceberg. Many passengers barely felt it. Some noticed a shiver beneath their feet. Others continued conversations. A few laughed. There was no cinematic explosion, no towering crash, only a long, tearing sound of steel meeting ice. Below the waterline, that quiet scrape was catastrophic. The hull had been opened across multiple compartments. Seawater rushed inside, cold, immediate, unstoppable. Titanic had been designed to survive flooding in several compartments, but not this many. Thomas Andrews, the ship's designer, inspected the damage and reached the conclusion no one wanted to hear. The ship would sink. Imagine standing inside the greatest machine of your age and realizing it had already died. At first, disbelief slowed everything. Passengers were told to put on lifebelts and move to the boat deck. Many resisted. Why leave a brightly lit ship that still seemed safe for a small open lifeboat in freezing darkness? The carpets were dry. The music still played. The lights still shone. This is how many disasters gain time. They hide inside appearances. Crew members uncovered lifeboats and began loading women and children first. Yet another problem now became visible. There were not enough seats for everyone aboard. Not nearly enough. Safety regulations were outdated, based more on tonnage than actual passenger counts. Titanic met the law, but the law had not met reality. The first lifeboats left partially empty. Some passengers refused to board. Some did not understand the danger. Some could not imagine that a ship called Unsinkable could sink in front of them. Minutes disappeared. Then the bow lowered further. The deck angle changed, and denial became impossible. Water reached lower corridors. Mailbags floated. Plates slid from tables. Doors jammed. Steam hissed through pipes. Crew voices grew sharper. Passengers moved faster. Fear spread unevenly. Some became calm. Some became generous. Some became cruel. Some simply froze. In third class, confusion was especially deadly. Families unfamiliar with the ship searched for stairways and exits. Language barriers caused delay. Locked gates in some areas, whether for procedure or control, cost time that could not be replaced. A vessel built to separate people by class was now teaching them equality through danger. The ocean did not distinguish titles. On deck, the band continued playing. History remembers that because it feels impossible. Yet in catastrophe, ordinary gestures can become acts of courage. To play music while others panic is not denial. Sometimes it is service. Lifeboats lowered into darkness one by one. Husbands kissed wives and stepped back. Mothers wrapped children tighter. Friends promised to meet again.
Some promises were impossible the moment they were spoken. By around 2 a.m., Titanic's bow was deeply submerged. The stern lifted higher into the freezing air. Propellers rose from the sea, glistening under starlight for the first and last time. From nearby lifeboats, survivors watched the impossible happen slowly. The largest ship on Earth now stood wounded against the sky. Inside, gravity became an enemy. Furniture slid across rooms, glass shattered. People lost footing and tumbled across tilted decks. Boilers tore loose. Lights flickered, returned, then flickered again. For a moment, the ship seemed to hesitate between worlds. Then steel gave way. The hull broke apart. One section plunged downward. The stern settled briefly, then rose nearly vertical. Human figures clung to rails and rigging like shadows on a wall.
It's suicide. The ship is gone.
At 2:20 a.m.,
left them to die.
Titanic vanished
We can't
beneath
save
the
them. We'll die
Atlantic.
too. I can't live with this.
But the worst part of the story began after the ship was gone. Hundreds of people were left in water near freezing point. Cold shock steals breath in seconds. Strength fades in minutes. Hands stop working.
And in the end, Titanic became more than a tragedy. She became a mirror. A reflection of everything humanity believes about itself when things are going well. That we are in control. That systems are safe. That progress moves only forward. But the ocean does not share those beliefs. It never has. After the sinking, investigations tried to find a single cause. A mistake. A failure. A responsible decision that could be corrected. But what they found instead was more disturbing.
Easy now. We've got you.
There was no single moment where everything went wrong.
Rest now. You say.
There was only a chain of moments that all felt right at the time. Speed through calm waters made sense. Confidence in modern engineering made sense. Trust in communication systems made sense. Even the decision to proceed through the night made sense. And that is what made it so dangerous. Because disasters are rarely born from chaos. They are born from order that is slightly misaligned with reality. On that night, Titanic was not ignored by intelligence. She was carried forward by it. Every system worked as designed. Every decision had logic behind it.
And yet, even after all of this, Titanic does not feel like a story that has ended. It feels like a warning that is still being understood. Because what happened in 1912 was not just the loss of a ship. It was the collapse of a belief system. A belief that scale equals safety. She sank because at some point, effort stopped mattering. That is the final transition every system fears. When human control no longer changes outcome. When action becomes symbolic rather than effective. And that moment always arrives later than expected. Not because people are careless, but because early signals rarely look catastrophic. They look manageable until they are not. And this is why Titanic continues to be studied. Not for what she was, but for what she reveals. That confidence is not the same as control. That stability is not the same as permanence. And that progress does not eliminate failure. It only changes its timing and scale. Today, the wreck sits in darkness so...
She sank because at some point, effort stopped mattering. That is the final transition every system fears. When human control no longer changes outcome. When action becomes symbolic rather than effective. And that moment always arrives later than expected. Not because people are careless, but because early signals rarely look catastrophic. They look manageable until they are not. And this is why Titanic continues to be studied. Not for what she was, but for what she reveals. That confidence is not the same as control. That stability is not the same as permanence. And that progress does not eliminate failure. It only changes its timing and